What if I told you that in medieval Europe, a woman could be tortured, mutilated, or even executed, not for committing a crime against the state, not for treason, not for murder, but simply for being accused of infidelity, while her male counterpart faced little to no consequences for the same act? She could lose her tongue, her face, or her life. Have you ever witnessed injustice so severe it made your blood boil? Have you seen someone punished far beyond what their actions deserved? Do you know anyone who's been judged by a completely different standard than others around them? This is the brutal reality women faced across medieval Europe. The accusation alone was enough to destroy a life. The punishments weren't just about justice, they were about control, humiliation, and sending a message to every other woman watching. Step out of line, and this could be you. From devices designed to silence and shame, to public spectacles that turned entire communities into executioners, to methods so cruel they'd make modern war crimes. Tribunals shudder. Medieval Europe perfected the art of punishing women for infidelity. Before we go further, if you're ready to explore one of history's darkest chapters and understand how far humanity has come and how far we still need to go, smash that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. What you're about to discover will shock you. But more importantly, it will teach you why we must never forget these horrors. Medieval Europe operated on a simple, brutal principle. Women were property. The church and state reinforced this through law and religion. A wife's infidelity wasn't just a personal betrayal, it threatened bloodlines, inheritance, and male honor. The punishment had to be severe enough to terrify every woman into submission. Let's start with a device that seems almost too cruel to be real. The scolds bridle, also known as the branks. This was an iron cage designed to fit over a woman's entire head. But the true horror wasn't the cage itself, it was what sat inside. A metal plate, often spiked or ridged, was positioned to press down on the tongue. Some versions had spikes that pierced straight through if the woman dared to move her mouth. Others had bells attached to the outside, announcing her shame to everyone within earshot. When a woman was accused of adultery, authorities would lock this contraption onto her head and parade her through town. She couldn't speak, couldn't defend herself, couldn't even swallow without excruciating pain. The message was clear. Women who stepped out of their prescribed roles would be silenced, literally and violently. The branks weren't just about physical pain, they were calculated psychological warfare. Neighbors, friends, even family members would gather to watch the humiliation. Children would point and laugh. Former friends would spit and throw refuse. The woman became a living warning, a spectacle of what happened when you defied the social order. Historical records from England and Scotland show these devices were used well into the 17th century. In one documented case from 1655, a woman in Newcastle wore the branks for 4 hours in the town square on market day, the busiest day of the week, ensuring maximum witnesses to her degradation. Her crime? A neighbor claimed to have seen her speaking with a man who wasn't her husband. The cruelty extended beyond the immediate punishment. After being branded as an adulteress and subjected to the branks, a woman's reputation was destroyed forever. Even if the accusations were false, and many were, she'd carry the stigma for life. Her children would be mocked. Her family would be shunned. In a society where a woman's worth was tied entirely to her virtue and reputation, this was social execution. Men accused of the same behavior, they might receive a fine, a stern warning from the church, or nothing at all. The double standard wasn't accidental, it was the entire point. Drop a comment below. Could you imagine living in a time when an accusation alone could destroy your entire existence? Let us know your thoughts. If you thought the branks were horrifying, wait until you hear about the cucking stool, a punishment that turned entire communities into participants in torture. The cucking stool, also called the ducking stool, was a wooden chair attached to a long wooden beam that functioned like a seesaw. The accused woman would be strapped into the chair, unable to move, unable to escape. Then the mechanism would be operated to plunge her repeatedly into rivers, ponds, or public water sources. This wasn't a quick dunk. The operators would submerge her until she was gasping, choking, her lungs burning for air. Then they'd pull her up just long enough for her to catch half a breath before plunging her back under. Again and again. The crowd would count along, cheering with each submersion like it was entertainment. The duration depended entirely on the mood of the authorities and the bloodthirst of the crowd. Some women endured dozens of plunges. Others drowned before the punishment was officially complete. Even those who survived faced pneumonia, infections from the filthy water, and permanent damage to their lungs. Different regions across Europe had their own variations. In Germany, women were sometimes placed in weighted sacks before being thrown into rivers. In France, the stool was modified to include iron spikes on the seat, ensuring the woman suffered even before hitting the water. Scottish towns positioned their cucking stools over particularly cold lochs, where hypothermia could set in within minutes. The psychological torture matched the physical. These punishments always happened in public squares or busy riverbanks during peak hours. Hundreds of townspeople would gather. The woman's humiliation was the main event of the day. Former friends would attend. Her own family sometimes felt pressured to watch to prove their loyalty to community standards. What made this particularly vicious was the participation factor. This wasn't an executioner doing his job in isolation. These were neighbors, shopkeepers, people she'd known her whole life, actively cheering for her suffering. The social fabric that should have protected her instead became the weapon used against her. Men caught in affairs. They might be asked to do penance at church or pay a small fine to their wife's family. The contrast couldn't be starker. But it gets worse. Some medieval authorities decided that temporary punishment wasn't enough. They wanted permanent markers, physical scars that would identify an adulteress for the rest of her life. Nose slitting was among the most common mutilations. Using a sharp blade, executioners would slice off part or all of a woman's nose. In a time when physical beauty was often a woman's only social currency, this was devastating. But the cruelty went deeper than vanity. Without a nose, her face became a permanent billboard advertising her supposed sin. Every conversation, every marketplace visit, every church service, people would see her mutilation and know immediately what she'd been accused of. Ear cropping followed similar logic. One or both ears would be cut off, sometimes in elaborate patterns designed to maximize disfigurement. In some German territories, the severed ears were nailed to the town hall door as trophies, remaining there until they rotted away. Then there was branding. Heated iron brands, often shaped like the letter A for adulteress, would be pressed into a woman's forehead, cheek, or shoulder. The searing pain was agonizing, but the real punishment was permanent. She could never hide what she'd been accused of. Every mirror became a reminder. Every stranger's stare became a judgment. These mutilations served a calculated purpose. They made women unmarriageable and unemployable. In medieval society, a disfigured woman had virtually no options for survival. She couldn't remarry. Most trades wouldn't hire her. She'd often end up begging on streets or dying in poverty. The intent was crystal clear: complete social annihilation. Authorities wanted to create living examples that would terrify other women into absolute obedience. The message was simple: your body isn't yours. Your choices aren't yours. And if you forget that, we'll make sure you never forget again. Here's the part that should make your blood boil. Historical records show that men convicted of adultery in the same regions and time periods typically received fines ranging from a few coins to a small livestock payment. No mutilation, no branding, no permanent disfigurement. The inequality wasn't a bug in the system, it was the system working exactly as designed. If this video is opening your eyes to historical injustices that need to be remembered, hit that share button and spread this knowledge. History forgotten is history repeated. For some women, the authorities decided even mutilation wasn't enough. The ultimate penalty awaited those deemed beyond redemption: death. Burning at the stake was reserved for cases deemed particularly scandalous. The woman would be tied to a wooden post surrounded by bundled wood and kindling. As flames climbed higher, the smoke would fill her lungs before the fire consumed her flesh. The church justified this by claiming fire purified the sinner's soul. In reality, it was public terror theatre designed to keep every woman in absolute fear. In certain regions, particularly in Germanic territories, convicted adulteresses faced drowning in weighted sacks. But this wasn't simple drowning. The woman would be sewn into a sack along with animals, sometimes a dog, a rooster, a snake, or a cat. The thrashing, clawing, biting animals would attack her in the confined space as the sack sank. Death came from a combination of animal attacks, drowning, and sheer terror. Burial alive represented perhaps the most psychologically torturous execution. The woman would be forced into a pit, sometimes bound, sometimes free to claw uselessly at the walls. Then dirt would be shoveled over her, slowly, deliberately. She'd feel the weight increasing, the air thinning, the darkness closing in. Some remained conscious for hours, suffocating by degrees. Historical records suggest these extreme executions were relatively rare compared to other punishments. Most accusations resulted in public shaming, mutilation, or banishment rather than death. But rarity wasn't the point. The point was fear. Every woman knew these methods existed. Every woman knew she could face them if accused. The threat alone was enough to enforce compliance. Looking back at these horrors, it's easy to feel superior to our medieval ancestors. We've abolished these punishments. We've established human rights. We've made progress. But have we truly learned the lessons? These punishments weren't just about adultery. They were about power, who holds it, who enforces it, and who suffers under it. They were about controlling women's bodies, choices, and autonomy. They were about creating systems where accusations mattered more than evidence, where gender determined guilt, and where society collectively participated in cruelty. The medieval tortures are gone, but gender-based double standards persist worldwide. Women still face harsher judgment for identical behaviors. Accusations still destroy women's lives, while men walk away unscathed. Control over women's bodies remains a political battlefield. History's value isn't just in knowing what happened, it's in recognizing patterns so we can break them. These medieval punishments should horrify us. They should also motivate us. Every right women have today was fought for against systems that looked as permanent and unchangeable as medieval law once seemed. We've come far. We have further to go. What shocked you most about these punishments? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe history like this needs to be remembered and shared, hit that subscribe button. We're diving into more untold stories from history that shaped our world, the good, the bad, and the absolutely brutal. Thanks for watching History Explore.